Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Live Beyond Average podcast. I am here with a longtime friend, Megan Spahn. We have known each other for a long time, but it's been a while since we've gotten together. What is going on? Tell me a little bit about, give our viewers a little bit about who you are, where you're from, and we're just going to dive right into this today.
Sounds good. Yeah, so Jordan said I'm Megan. I'm originally from Vermillion, just a town little ways from here, but I live in Sioux Falls. I've lived there the last, 15, 20 years. And we were kind of talking earlier, we met back 9 or 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And I had recently had twins, and I was really overweight and out of shape, and I found you, and we did personal training, and that was super helpful for me, and kind of part of my fitness journey, just learning more about myself, and I found that I was quite stubborn, actually. I said I can't a lot when I hadn't even tried yet, so you were really good for me with saying, well, let's take a second and try this before you say you can't do it, you know? So that was really good for me to learn more about myself, and just kind of my background professionally, since 1996, so that's really dating myself, but sure. I got my master's degree in educational psychology and counseling, and so I went on to do licensed mental health work for a couple of decades, and just in the last 2 to 3 years, I transitioned my business into more private pay clients and private clients that really are ready to make change. And so what I loved about your podcast, Living Beyond Average, like those are the folks that I'm looking for, people that really want change in their life and not just saying that they want it, but actually really doing the work to get it. So
right, and I think you nailed that right, is doing the work to get it.
Yeah.
Because that's so much of everything in life is, we all want a lot of things, but the things that are really good in life take some energy and take a little sacrifice and take some work. But yeah, let's backtrack for 1 second. You know, you mentioned how we met 9 years ago, and I think about that, and I'm like, wow, that really was 9 years ago. And so you had talked about, you know, how the personal training helped you, and it's funny because you said you were a little stubborn, and I'm like, yeah, you were training with me in my really early days, like my first days.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I was probably really stubborn and like over the top back then too,
oh, really?
You know? And so it's kind of funny thinking back on that, but you know, you had mentioned a story to me about how you had said, and you had talked about how when you got into your early years, you did the mental health stuff for 20 years, and how you felt a little unfulfilled with after so long doing the same thing. Tell us a little bit about how that feeling came about, and then what led you to changing it up a little bit and searching, you know, for something that you said was beyond average.
Right. Yeah. So I did, for over 2 decades, the more traditional, what we call traditional mental health therapy, where you come into an office and you talk about whatever the concern is, and then me as the provider would bill that to insurance, and then you'd come back again the next week, and it's just kind of like the medical model. And it works for some people, and it worked sort of for me in the beginning, but then I found that it felt to me kind of Groundhog Day, like where they just kept coming back with the same, like no traction. And then I had to really look at myself, like what is my role in this? How am I maybe enabling this?
Okay.
Sort of like in training, like if you don't push your client, you're like, oh, okay, it's too heavy. You don't have to lift that today. Let's do something else. Like, you know, like you're not really doing your job as a trainer if you're not pushing them,
right.
You know?
Right.
So I found myself feeling kind of stuck, like I felt like I could only do so much, and then if I got resistance, then they would either quit, fire me, didn't come back, you know, whatever. And so I'm like, there's got to be a different way to this that's not billing it to insurance, or if they don't show up for their appointment, that's okay too. You know?
Right.
And so it led me to really doing some research into there's got to be something more out there, and that's when I discovered this relationship school in Boulder, Colorado, and I just really dug in. I flew out there, I met the guy who created the school, I went to all these trainings, and for the last 3 years have been doing that.
Okay. So how much different is that stuff now compared to 1996, even 2006
Oh, right. Yeah.
profession? I mean,
Yeah.
is it like literally a 180 different?
So
What's
for
it like?
me, it is. I know there's still providers out there that do what's considered the traditional mental health way, like where you
Okay.
come in and you have your 1 hour session or whatever, and then you come back again the next week or a couple weeks later, whatever.
Yeah.
So that does still exist for sure. And what's different for me anyway is the approach is just a lot more laser. It's a lot more direct. So if you come in and say, hey, I've got ABC going on in such and such situation, within 15 to 20 minutes, we're going to have solution. We're going to have some kind of direction and empowerment to go forth. Instead of it just being the support, there's the challenge.
Okay.
And in traditional therapy, support is the way. Like, I'm a good listener, I'm going to hear you, I'm going to reflect back to you what I heard, and then we're going to go on and do some more listening.
Okay.
The challenge is the piece that's typically missing, and that's what I have found to be the most helpful for people. They want to be pushed. They want to be challenged. They want to go beyond average. If they didn't, why would they be there?
Right. Right. So you were really stuck between like a rock and a hard place after so many years of doing the original, because you felt like, I want to push these people, but if I overly push, they're not coming back. They're not.
Yeah.
They're gonna fire. You said fire you.
Yeah.
And so so you were like you said, like you had to sit back and really, am I enabling this?
Yeah.
Like, because you're wanting to get them better, but if you overly push,
Yeah.
you're out
Right.
making a living.
And you maybe
Right?
can
I mean,
think back on when you had clients that maybe
100%.
didn't like how you did something,
Oh, 100%.
then they would just quit, or they
Yep.
wouldn't come back, or
Yeah.
they'd pay for however many sessions and then only come to a fourth of them, or,
Yep. Oh, yeah. I mean, you're totally, even if you're doing it subconsciously, catering somewhat to what your client wants.
Yeah.
And I mean, I even look at now some of the clients I have, and I know exactly what they don't like to do
Yeah.
and what they like to do. And so it back then it would have been like, when I was in my younger years, I totally would have, it was like this fine line between, I want to like hammer you, but I want to keep you, because you're broke, you're out of college.
Yeah, it's the paycheck.
Yep,
Yeah.
you're figuring it out. And now it's like really finding that fine balance and early communication for myself within that, of like why we are doing certain things, how beneficial they are, and just reiterating and communicating. And I think that part has grown so much over the years, for sure.
Right.
But it is funny because you're like, okay, this person really hates when we do this style of exercise, but that is exactly what they need. And so it's about finding ways to like get them to do a little bit of it, a little bit at a time, and just like keep drawing them in, and then hopefully they see and feel the benefit of that, which is funny because it is exactly the same for you, right? As you're trying to get them to do this challenge, and when they do it, what's the result?
Right.
And how are they feeling from that result, which then leads to
Yeah.
the change they're trying to make, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Which
yeah.
is pretty amazing. So,
And for me, if I can just interrupt.
oh,
for a
interrupt
second,
me. I'll talk forever.
Okay.
Interrupt me.
While you
Yeah.
were talking, it reminded me, it links back to when I said earlier about me complaining. Like, no, I can't do that, or I don't want to, or whatever. And you challenging me to try it. And so in relationships, let's say somebody's coming in complaining about their partner or a family member, it's my job to challenge them about their role in it. Like, it's not just so-and-so's fault. It's not just because your spouse does this or that. What is your role in that situation? You're not exempt from why that is the way it is.
It always takes two to tango is what you're saying.
Right. And nobody's really the victim,
Yeah.
And, clearly there are situations that are abusive and that kind of thing. But I'm talking about, in general, most of us have what we would consider reasonable relationships.
Yes.
And yet we all have conflict, because that's normal too. And so when we encounter conflict, how we navigate through that, how do we get beyond it being like the Groundhog Day moment, where it's just over and over and over again, the same issue.
Right.
Because we don't feel heard, or we don't feel understood, or we don't feel respected, or we don't feel like they get it, or that kind of thing. So.
Oh, totally. So what is the most, I mean, like, who benefits? Obviously, everybody benefits, but people that are coming into you, is it mainly like couples? Can it be, let's say, a brother who isn't getting along with a dad, or a brother not getting along with a brother? What is the most common thing, or is it, I guess, tell me, is it all relationships in general?
You know, I feel really blessed to say that it's all relationships in general.
Okay.
Because my day can look anything from a same-gendered couple with children,
Okay.
to a traditional couple, husband and wife,
Yeah.
to maybe what we would call more of an elderly person in their late 70s, early 80s, who's dealing with life transitions or having to sell their home and downsize.
Yeah.
And those relationships with adult children that maybe aren't helping or not wanting to, there's just all kinds of dynamics. In addition to some corporate type coaching where you own a business and you have employees, and maybe some of those employees are related to you, or are your buddies that you brought along, and then now that you're in business together, there's some that happens.
Of course, yes, of course.
And so then that all boils down to communication and navigating that. So.
Anybody literally can benefit from any relationship issue that they're having with any party, essentially. Yeah. That's really cool. And so you really dove into this. What year did you start diving into? This has been like 4 years ago?
2017.
Okay, so you were just changing it up, transitioning yourself into some of these changes. That's interesting. So Boulder, Colorado. Tell me a little bit about the training. You said you were there almost like every 3 months.
Yeah.
So this is intense.
It is intense. There's nothing else like it that I have found. It is expensive, and you get what you pay for. That's kind of my belief. So the school was founded by a guy named Jason Gaddis, and you can find him online. He also does a podcast. I believe it's called the Smart Couple Podcast. And there's lots of good info out there, but his approach is very direct. So it's very living beyond average.
Yeah.
Like you just get in and you do it. You don't talk about doing it.
Yes.
And there's such a big difference, I think.
A huge difference. I mean, anybody who's goal-oriented or thinks, maybe we should use the term, thinks they're goal-oriented or has ambitions to want to get something done, totally different to be, and this is hard because I've always considered myself to be a dreamer, but then I can't remember where I heard it, but I heard it somewhere where maybe it was just a statement that I saw online or something where it was like, well, dreamers dream and, doers do, essentially. Right. I think it was in better terms than that.
Right.
But that was like, it kind of hit me a little bit in the sense of like, well, I've always considered myself a dreamer, and I go after and do and take action from what I want to do. So like, I didn't like that term, but I was like, but it's true. Mm-hmm. And so it is hard to know like, okay, how are you taking action towards those steps that, whether it be in a relationship, whether it be, it can be a relationship with yourself, right? I mean, that's a key thing that, I'm sure people can benefit from too, is just coming in and, hey, I have negative self-talk to myself, or I'm self-aware enough to realize where I'm falling short, but how do I take the next steps forward to actually go after and make the changes that I want to make?
Right.
And I think that's kind of the first steps, in my opinion, is, at least in myself over the last several years, is when it was weird because it was like 6 months before I turned 30, and I like hit this new level of just self-awareness. And I think it was because I was spending so much time alone with my new job and things like that, and it's like I was just in my own head way more.
Right.
And you start to like figure these things out, and like I was thinking about why I am the way I am, or why I do things the way I do. And like you just start learning more about yourself, which is super key, but then it gives you this opportunity to really, okay, I want to be here. I'm here. What do I actually have to, what steps are holding you back from getting there?
Yeah, and it reminds me of the term personal responsibility. So when someone says like, well, I just want to lose 10 pounds, or I just want to this or that, where are they personally accountable to that? Because you're choosing what you put in your mouth. So then when you say you want this, but yet you're not really doing what it takes to get there, the personal responsibility piece, I think, definitely applies to that with just our own health in our own way. And then in relationships, well, I really want my spouse to hear me more or be more this, that, whatever. okay, well, what are you doing to help that outcome?
Yeah.
Because if you're critical or complaining or telling them that they're being a bad partner or whatever, that's probably not going to lean toward them wanting to change much, you know?
Right. Not because, especially when they can just come back and be like, well,
Yeah.
like, you don't do these things.
Yeah, let me tell you about,
And isn't that probably a common thing in couples' relationships, I'm assuming? I mean, in my own marriage, we've had to learn to grow and help each other out and communicate. And a big part of that for us was just, hey, I need help with this, you need help with this, I want support in this. And like actually putting some things out there for each other and be like, oh, I didn't know that you ever felt that way. Like, I'm sorry, like totally would have helped you with that. Or I totally would have came and sat with you on the couch with this or whatever it is.
But you had to communicate it.
You had to speak it,
You couldn't just hold the resentment and be mad that it didn't happen.
Right. Which us guys, I think, do that a lot. I don't know. I feel like me and my buddies, we talk about this more like the older we get. And we're like, oh yeah, you're going through that too. And I think, again, that goes back to communication. It's like finding some people that, that it's okay to talk to and feel like it's good to get some of those frustrations out. And like, that can be your buddy, it should be your spouse or whoever it is that you're struggling with comes down to that communication. Weird.
Yeah. Right.
Actually communicating. So I really love to give the listeners some like tangible things that they can take from some of these things. So let's go with, like, if you don't mind, and let's do like a couple different scenarios just in case, like, depending on the listener. Like, let's just do like a traditional relationship. Obviously there's a million things that can go wrong or what you're approached with, but what is like maybe one or two of the most common issues, maybe the super common one, and like a tidbit of like first step advice maybe that they could roll with and maybe work on that would lead them to you for help too.
Yeah. So what comes to mind that seems to be pretty common is what I refer to as you versus I language. So you did this instead of I felt this.
Okay.
Does that make sense? So,
yes.
And then using kind of a template of when you left your socks on the floor in the bedroom, I got frustrated or I felt angry and I just want you to know that.
Okay.
And then the other person can be like, well, why does that upset you? Or, there may be some dialogue there as to why it's a big deal.
Okay.
Or it might be as simple as, oh, thanks for letting me know. I didn't know it bothered you.
Sure.
So the you versus I language, like, you just need to this instead of I really feel this when that happens. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so communicating more of that, the emotional feel to it versus an attacking language of, hey, leaving your socks on the floor pisses me off.
Yeah.
And versus, hey, like, when you left your socks on the floor, like, that really bothered me. I cleaned up the day before.
Yeah, or I've been picking them up every day since 1997.
Yep.
And now I'm finally done doing that, and I want to tell you I don't want to do that anymore. Sometimes holding on to that resentment years and years and years worth it. And it maybe starts out small like that, like, oh, it's just their socks, like, no, but, oh, I'm so in love and it's all good, But eventually it might become something.
Okay.
And sometimes people miss that opportunity to just say what they're needing.
Okay.
And so I like to use kind of that template of when this happens, I feel this.
When this happens, I feel this way. Okay.
So it's like you're sharing impact as to how it affects you personally.
Okay. What if somebody's just like massively afraid to even bring it up? Like, I'm sure that is super common, right? Like, because they're so afraid of conflict. Last time they brought something up, it was a big explosion and they fought for a week.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's super common in relationships. So, like, what if that is the big case where they're like so afraid, male or female, that I don't even want to bring it up anymore because it always causes this big conflict. Because maybe the other half struggles to just soak in and listen.
Yeah, so that's a good point. So I think what can be helpful is maybe the term of front loading. So meaning like you're going to first tell them 2 or 3 things that you really love about the relationship.
Okay, yeah.
This is what's going well for me. This is what I love about us or hanging out with you or whatever. And you show them the value. The reason I'm even in this with you is because I value you. I like this. You're giving examples of what's going well.
Yeah.
And this is one piece of our relationship that bothers me, and I'm wondering if I can tell you it. Like, is it okay for me to tell you something that bothers me?
Okay.
So also asking permission. So
Interesting.
front
Never thought of
loading,
that.
yeah, front loading a conversation with what's going well and what you like,
Okay.
and then asking permission. Like, is it okay if I share something with you that's been on my mind or that's been bothering me?
Interesting.
When the other person gives permission, they've signed up then for the conversation.
Okay.
If they don't, if they're like, no, I don't want to hear it, I don't care what you have to say, then you may want to look a little into, like, do I want to be in this? You know,
Sure.
How committed am I to someone who's not committed
Sure.
to us?
Yeah.
You know?
Super interesting. That's cool. Okay, so we did a little bit on relationships between like a traditional relationships. Let's do one for siblings
Okay.
because
Yeah.
I think that'd be kind of cool too. Just like
Yeah.
a basic. What do you see the most, or what do you see the most in when you have siblings come, or a sibling relationship, one person come in, issues with another?
Yeah, so it depends on the age. Like if we're
Oh,
talking
sure.
littles,
Yeah.
like I've had interactions with little kids, and it's just really teaching social skills and how to say what they need and that kind of
Okay.
thing. But in adulthood, I think that's more of what you're leaning toward.
Yeah,
In
yes.
grown-ups of siblings. It also is very similar to partnership in
Okay.
that I think it's important to say what you value and what's going well, and then what you're wanting to look at or what's not going so well, and then still asking for that permission, like, hey, something has really been on my mind and I hesitate bringing it up because in the past when I brought things up it hasn't gone well, and
Yeah.
so and you're my version is you're kind of teaching that person what you need and how you need it.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, and just relearning how to communicate specific ways with specific people. I'm assuming you're helping teach that. You're just like, approaching these situations differently.
When I think of, I only have one older brother, so when I
Okay.
think of sibling, I think of our interactions, and he lives in Nashville, so I don't see him a lot.
My sister lives in Nashville. That's so crazy.
Awesome. That's a great place to visit.
Yeah, it is. It is.
And so if there's something about, like, let's say our parents or a family issue, and I might say to him, like, hey, Michael, here's what's going on with mom or dad, and sometimes his distance is like, yeah, well, you just take care of it, because mom and dad are in Vermilion
Sure.
and I'm closer,
Yes.
And then it's my opportunity then to say, well, hang on, that's overwhelming for me.
Okay.
I'm reaching out to you because I want support, or I want us to be a team in this. Are you up for that? Like, so just, again, communicating, like you were mentioning earlier, stuff at home with Amy, like, oh, I didn't know you wanted me to sit with you on the couch. Like,
Yeah.
you just need to tell me that, and I'm
Yep.
right here,
Yep, totally. That's so, like, even just learning how to respond, like, it sounds like you're on the phone, like you're just given that situation,
Yeah.
like, and not being afraid to, like, respond quickly, not letting it mellow up inside of you. Yeah, because that does. It messes with you for days until you bring, and then you feel like you missed the situation. How do I bring it back up?
Right.
And so just learning how to have that self-awareness to communicate that the instant
Well,
you're
and
feeling
for
something.
people who don't like conflict, that can be kind of really scary.
Totally. Yeah.
And so, really checking in with your own self stuff, like living beyond average, that means you're going to push yourself in areas that you're not comfortable.
Yes.
So emotionally, you're pushing yourself like you do lifting the big stuff.
Right.
You're
Right.
pushing yourself in a physical way, and you've got that down. You know how to do that.
Right.
And then how do I push myself in an emotional way when it's really uncomfortable, or I don't have confidence, I don't know what I'm doing.
Interesting. So do you feel like, maybe this is not even a question that's on topic, but like, do men struggle with some of these things more than females? Is it or is it kind of equal in the sense of, or is the mindsets completely different when they're coming into you, or are they actually really similar when they're coming into you?
Yeah, that's a great question.
That's just my own psyche wondering.
I think if you would have asked me this like 10 years ago, I would have said it's probably more challenging for men.
Okay.
But what I have found is it's more challenging for those who are uncomfortable with conflict.
Okay.
So that really is not gender specific, because there
Sure.
are women who hate conflict, there are men who hate conflict. That is kind of all over the board.
Okay.
But being uncomfortable with conflict or yuck or that kind of feeling is really where it is.
Sure. Which is super ironic if you really think about it, because if you're not, you're not into conflict, which nobody probably truly is, if you actually care about people.
Yeah.
But like, you don't want to bring something up because it causes conflict, but if you don't bring it up, it's only causing conflict with yourself and causing greater conflict between people. And so it's really ironic that if you don't learn to bring that up, it's not causing conflict.
And the other thing that I found that I've learned in the last few years is conflict really equals love. Because if you care enough, you're going to go that extra mile, which means it's going to get ugly, it's going to get uncomfortable, there's going to be yuck that happens.
Yeah.
But the only reason you're doing it is because you love them. You love them enough to go that far.
Right.
If you don't really care and you're just like, whatever, I'm only going to see them twice a year at Christmas or whatever, then you may not do it. You may just kind of stay put because it doesn't matter enough. Or somebody in the Hy-Vee checkout line that butts in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
You probably aren't going to invest in that interaction because you're more than likely not going to see them again.
Right. You can let it go.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Not worth the conflict.
Right.
But yeah, if you're arguing with your spouse every other week about the same kind of thing, obviously there's enough there to want to, that you care. Yeah, you actually love them. That, I want to get this fixed.
Yes.
I don't want this to go bye-bye.
Yeah, so that's what I
Interesting.
have really embraced about challenge and conflict, because to me, conflict can also be challenge.
Right.
What I've embraced about that is it just means I'm showing how much I care, how much I love, and how much I'm willing to go into this.
Interesting. I want to touch on this because like you just keyed in, like you mentioned the word challenge, and this is something that's been on my mind so much. And like, do you find yourself in your professional world, just because you're so in tune with this, but even in yourself, like as you get older, as you become more personal growth, more professional growth, do you actually find yourself, or do people find themselves like seeking out this challenge to better themselves, or like getting kind of addicted to this, like, I don't want to be complacent, I like having this challenged feel? Like, is there accomplishment from that? Do you find that at all?
So that I'm leaning to you for that answer, because I'm like, this podcast, the name of this podcast would tell me that there's an audience that's leaning toward that exact point.
Yes.
There's an audience out there that wants something more. They want to be challenged. They don't want the mediocrity. They don't want it's good enough.
Yes. And I completely, I find myself that way much more, especially as I'm getting older. I feel like when I was younger, it was just natural. Like, you're hungry for things, and then you accomplish, and then there's the next stage in your life. There's a lot of quick stages when we're younger, and we're going like, you're in high school and you're trying to make the varsity team, and you're trying to get a 4.0 and get a scholarship or whatever it is, and the stages are quick. There's just quick little stages. You're on to the next, and then I feel like when you're out of college, maybe you get a job. It's still kind of quick. You're trying to climb the ladder, but then like for me, as I turned 31 this year, it was like, you're starting to get some of these, for me, I was starting to get some of these places where I finally wanted to be. It took me a decade, but you're like in, and so yes, you're revamping now to the next goal, but it's not like, with the intensity can change within you, I feel like, and so you can get kind of soft. And so it's really weird and mine kind of became like mentally aware a little bit more when, like, on the training side of things, because I use the training so much for the analogies, and we've talked on that today, on how much it correlates into the other areas of our life, and why I like to have people, the importance of health and fitness, because it stems into all these other areas of our life. But for me, it was like, okay, I almost like purposely wanted to self-sabotage my own like fitness level, and so like over like in this last year, I still train really hard, but not at that same intensity as my younger years, and I really didn't know I was doing it. But I'm like back into this stage where I'm like, I'm so happy now that I'm not quite as fit and athletic and as in shape as I was 2 years ago, and I'm like so pumped for the challenge and the process of like squaring up again and like rebuilding to be better.
Yeah.
And it's almost like it didn't happen by accident. Like I was purposely wanting that.
Sure.
And so like, and then like obviously with like goals in my business and things like that you do, I feel like just people want like and you find yourself at that crossroad of okay, I can take this risk and take on the challenge, or I can be average.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And not saying average is bad, but like you said, I think there is a audience out there that is that is at that crossroad, that is like, okay, I'm either gonna turn left and take this risk,
right,
and it's gonna be a challenge, or I'm just gonna keep going on my path that I'm on. I'm good. I'm happy with where things are at. Maybe I'm just a little complacent with it, but I'm good with it.
Yeah.
And so I feel like there is like this, as we grow older and become more self-aware, that we're building relationships with ourselves, with people close to us, that there is that hungry challenge to want to be challenged.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and I think what you're describing, or the picture I got in my head, was there's moments where it gets really heavy.
Yes.
And we need to just kind of take a step back and perhaps give ourselves a get out of jail free card for a day or a week or something like that. And it's those of us that are living beyond average that then jump back on track. The folks that give themselves an out but then never get back on track, I would say, is more common.
Okay.
It's more common to be, quote, lazy and
Sure.
to do it the lazy, easy way. And that, we see that with our kids. If something can get done in an easy way versus a challenging way, they're probably going to choose the easy way.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of adults do that too. Like, if we can get done with the same thing but in an easier way, we tend to lean toward that.
Right. And it's just kind of crazy because like so many of these things like are actually like they're actually in like a biblical sense. Like it's really funny, like just in our church last Sunday, I have the Live Beyond Average podcast. So much of that is just like you're pushing that out there, but to me it was always just like that's what we should be doing as people. But like we ran into a scripture, I think it was like, I'm pretty sure it was Ephesians like 4 and 5, and it talks about literally like living life, not missing opportunities, that the days are short and you need to take advantage of these opportunities. That's paraphrased.
Right.
But it was just like that
Don't
one really
take the easy way.
Yeah, and it really hit me on like, oh, it is actually like biblical in the sense that we shouldn't be just complacent.
Right.
That we should be out there trying to live a life
to its fullest.
Yep, to its fullest.
And that's how we honor God and honor that we are even here and
totally.
all of that.
Yeah, it's really cool. And so like when you're seeing all those things come full circle and touching, you're like, okay, like we are on paths that we're supposed to be on, or we aren't on a path that we're supposed to be on, and I'm supposed to be taking some challenging steps forward to become better. And that's like, I had Zach on, one of my friends, on the podcast last week or 2 weeks ago, and he literally said, and it's true, whoever finished, he used workout as an example, whoever finished a workout and was like, well, I don't feel better about that.
Right.
And it's true, like whoever worked towards a goal, even if it was you didn't reach that goal, but you worked your butt off and you learned things about yourself, whoever did that was like, oh, I'm so upset that I did that.
Yeah, I should have stayed in bed.
Nobody. Like, even when you have bad experiences with work, I mean, I've had life-changing professions where I was like, well, that 18 months was awful.
Yeah.
And I wish I wouldn't have made that change. I wouldn't trade it, though.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because it's like...
Well, it helped.
It shapes you, right?
Yeah.
And you learn things about yourself, and you grow as a person, and you learn how not to do certain things and how to do certain things. And so it's like, yeah, it sucked, but yeah, I would still go through it because I know the benefit of going through the yuck, as you say.
Right.
And so, yeah, our lives are meant not. It never says our life's going to be easy anywhere.
Yeah.
Or as my old shooting coach in high school would say, nothing good comes easy.
Yes, exactly.
It's like these simple little cliche sayings that are like, they're silly when you say them. You're kind of like, yeah, that's corny. That's, but they're like, rarely are they false.
Right. And as I look around this room, I mean, just think of how many hours and hours and hours of effort and sacrifice to achieve the outcome.
Right.
And not because you're saying, look, I'm better than anybody else.
Right.
It's your own internal journey.
Yep.
Your own outcome.
Yeah, and it's just like you're talking about how your history leading up to where you are today, like you go back and you're like, man, there were some long hours in the office where I was there. I remember I was training you, your hours were insane.
Yeah.
Like you were...
10, 11 o'clock at night.
Yep, you were getting up at 5 a.m. to come train with me,
Yeah.
but you were with clients until midnight the night before, and in some in some of those areas you were like not feeling fulfilled in.
Right.
So like how challenging I'm sure some of those mornings getting up when you're emotionally shot dead and just tired and physically with twins.
But wanting to live beyond average, even way back then, I knew there was something.
Yes.
And I could see that in you too, like at the gym when you just had this entrepreneurial spirit in you way back in your early 20s.
Mm-hmm. Just, isn't that crazy how certain things just push us. We're supposed to be with certain people at certain times.
Yeah.
And
God has a plan.
Totally. And it's funny because you look back and you're like, oh, yeah, I can see all those little dots connect, one to the next, one to the next, one to the next. But you look forward and you're like, dude, I don't know what am I doing?
Yeah.
And I think that's a common thing, especially for high goal, high ambition, dreaming people that want to accomplish things, that they do feel that like aloneness and that feeling of like, dude, what am I doing right now?
Right.
But then they doesn't stop, and they make the choice that, okay, that feeling that I'm feeling right now isn't going to stop me from taking some more steps forward.
Right.
Because I know when I take those more steps forward, when I look back, I can see those dots starting to connect over time. I can feel it, I can see it, they're tangible, but nothing's tangible a lot of times moving forward.
Right.
And I find that in my own, my own journey is like, I just talked to a group of kids and adults about this a few weeks ago up in Devil's Lake on how, we invest so much time into certain things that we love and that are important to us, and it really stinks when that investment doesn't come back in what we're working towards.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of times that investment comes back to us in other areas of our life that we didn't dream on it, but it was much bigger than what we had thought because there was a different plan for us.
Right.
And then again, the dots happen. But you just have to, like when you feel that, you have to remember, okay, like when I did work hard, I put forth effort, good things do happen. Mm-hmm. And it might be somewhere else, but it does happen.
It may come at some point where you were least expecting it. But
yeah, and so just like in a relationship, putting the proper, learning things, and maybe it doesn't pan out in the relationship with your brother or your girlfriend or whatever it is, or your spouse, but that doesn't mean that
you didn't learn from it.
You didn't learn from it, and that work is going to pay off in another relationship. You applied it to a friendship that was half broken, and it fixed the friendship, and that led to something greater. And so there's all these.
It's all intertwined.
I'm just a big believer in that. It does, like you look back and like, dude, it kind of sounds corny when you're speaking, but it is the truth. And I think most people probably have experienced some of that, but maybe haven't sat down to actually like, oh yeah, like when I did do all of this, these things happened. It's kind of interesting. Yeah. So, Megan, what does living? Let's end with this, because first time somebody's on the show, I always like to ask, like, what truly does living beyond average mean to you? Like, if you had to give somebody a 3 to 5 minute answer, or even a 60-second answer, what does it mean to you?
Yeah. For me, it means leaving every situation a little bit better than how I found it, and just not just personally, but in everyone I encounter, every interaction I have, everything that I do, just living beyond average, like doing something more to make it better, more fulfilling, that's the word you used earlier, for the other person's experience as well.
I like that. Yeah, it's not always about yourself.
And then also, and we've heard this one a lot, doing what you would do if you weren't afraid.
Ooh. I don't know if I've heard it quite that, said quite that way.
So yeah.
Say that one more time.
Do what you would do if you were not afraid.
Okay.
So like, when things hold us back, or it feels like a challenge, or like, oh, but what about this? Okay, but what would you do if you weren't afraid? Do that. Yeah. And that's living beyond average for me.
I love it. That's awesome. I love it. Very cool. Well, thank you so much for jumping on. How, if people want to contact you or anything, what is the best means for contacting you?
Yeah, so my website is www.meganspawn.com.
Okay.
Megan, MEGANSPAWN.com. Okay. My cell number's on there, texting, calling,
perfect.
Email.
Perfect. We will link that. I'll put that up if you're watching the video today of the podcast. We will just put that down here in subtitles. You can grab it. If not, if you're watching or listening on podcast platform. We'll put that in the descriptions as well for you guys so you can easily access.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for jumping on, Megan. So pumped. And you talk about like connecting, the powers of social media. Like, it's just cool. Like, that's how we reconnected a little bit here. And I hope we can have you on again.
Yes,
and hopefully we have a little bit of feedback and we can have you on again and do this. So it was awesome.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you guys so much for jumping on the show today. Of course, if you love the show or you know somebody that can benefit from it as well that you're thinking of, don't be afraid to share it. All those little bits help us. Thank you so much.
Bye.